My name is Brittany Jefferson. I am a classroom teacher. I currently teach 5th grade. This is going on my 9th year in the classroom. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. And, I am really connected to the city. It's kind of part of, who I am. Not, especially like living in LA, a place where a lot of people come from other states, to move here. I feel a special connection to the city, having, been born here and being a multi-generational Angelino. I am also an online climate justice educator. So I work to educate caregivers on climate justice related topics and taking action to combat climate change with justice-oriented solutions and culturally responsive instruction. So the goal of today's session is to expand your understanding on how we can implement climate literacy instruction across subjects and content areas. And I aim to kind of build off of the climate science and the oceanic focus that came from the Monterey Bay Aquarium PD session 2, and kind of widen our scope to include a climate justice lens and thinking about how we can integrate climate science and explore social justice issues in a variety of subject areas. So I do want to make a note on climate literacy champions. So if you are a climate literacy champion on your campus, or you would like to be, or just would be interested in helping to facilitate a breakout room, go ahead and put CLC in front of your name so that my colleague Vivian can get you sorted into breakout room, into a breakout room where you can, help facilitate some of the discussion. So let's go ahead and begin. So there's a warm-up activity I do in my class sometimes that I'm sure some of you who are teachers in the classroom or have been in the classroom may have heard of, but like a 6-word summary. So in 6 words or less, what was your biggest takeaway from the Monterey Bay PD? We can go ahead and just put it in the chat. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So I'm seeing lots of great answers just about, the importance of, taking urgent action now, getting students involved in, connecting to the earth, loving the earth, and also just, working as communities, how important it is to protect our oceans, ecosystem health, stubborn optimism. I love the stubborn optimism too. We're definitely going to talk about a version of that that I call, and that a lot of other people call in the climate justice space, like radical imagination. We have to be able to imagine what a more just, sustainable future would look like in order for us to be able to take the actions and take the steps to get us to that place. Great. Amazing, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and split off into our first breakout session. And so in your session, you are going to discuss these 2 questions with your group, kind of introduce yourselves, where you work, what grade levels you're working in, maybe what brought you to this PD, and then what you think you know about climate change, and what you think you know about the connection between climate change and social justice. Just kind of opening it up, you can take yourself off mute and put it in the chat, raise your hand. What do you think you know about climate change? And what do you think you know about how climate change and social justice are connected? Hi, I see a hand up. Hiroko?
Hi, yes. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Well, I think it goes hand in hand because climate affects people, and people are definitely involved in relationships, and that relationships also are tied together by equity and access. And so social justice is very much a part of anything to do with climate because it affects all people in the world. Something like that.
Thank you for sharing. Anne?
Yeah, I agree 100%. The social justice component of climate justice is a wraparound. There is no climate justice without social justice. And if we look at the indigenous peoples whose lands and waters we occupy, if we could have learned from their wisdom and knowledge, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. And it might be a really good idea to circle back to the traditional ecological knowledge of First Nations people to help us get out of the situation we've got ourselves into.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I'm also seeing some great things in the chat. Also, props to Lucy for talking about this on the session earlier this week. Climate justice, ambitious and bold climate action is fighting for social justice as frontline communities are most impacted by climate change and catastrophes. Excellent, excellent.
Historically,
8 minutes, there we go.
books around environmental activism and the struggle for climate justice excludes most, if not all, narratives of the communities most impacted by environmental issues. We've curated some key moments in the intersectional history of environmental activism in the United States, which was known as Turtle Island before colonizers renamed it Turtle Island. This history stretches much further back than the work of figures like John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt. It includes intricacies and nuances extending beyond whitewashed textbook narratives. The vibrant and resilient histories of historically oppressed BIPOC communities have been intentionally dulled and erased. With the support, guidance, and wisdom of the IE community, this project begins to illuminate BIPOC communities' sustained efforts in cultivating a more just, aligned world for all people and the planet. Existing with Turtle Island, pre-16th century. Before colonizers made their way to Turtle Island, thriving indigenous communities coexisted with the land, flora, and fauna. Although indigenous cultures and beliefs are deeply intricate and varied across regions, there are many resonances between different tribal nations' land stewardship traditions. Before this land was colonized in the 16th century, people lived as nature rather than separate from nature, with the entitlement of dropping in on nature to hunt, build, or otherwise take from Mother Earth. An aligned relationship between people and the planet allowed communities to consciously tend to and be nourished by the environment, without the destruction or exploitation that we see so frequently today. During this time frame, we can observe reciprocity, which is rooted in the idea that as humans, we belong to the land, rather than owning it. This reciprocity manifested in many ways, namely compassionate land stewardship and giving back to the land for all that it gives to us. Colonization, beginning in the 1500s. Throughout colonization and westward expansion, a close connection between the genocide of indigenous peoples and breakdown of natural ecosystems takes shape. As a reference, let's consider bounties placed on buffalo and bison as white colonizers moved westward. These buffalo bounties and slaughter were a means of starving indigenous communities into submission, both physically and culturally. In the 1500s, bison numbered between 60 to 30 million, but by the late 1800s, only 1,000 were left. Once indigenous communities were stripped of their livelihoods and rendered docile, the white colonizers could continue acting upon manifest destiny. Land and resources that were once inherent to the traditions and day-to-day life of indigenous communities would become commodified. Due to the massive ideological shifts rooted in feudalism and soon to be capitalism, the exploitation of land, labor, and the planet to generate profit is looming. It's important to note that data tracking is a Western way of measuring and indicating change and impact, one that is necessitated by a capitalist system. While resurfacing narratives preceding the rise of capitalism, we prefer to refrain from using such methods of tracking impact. Given that those privileged enough to have their stories heard and circulated in their truest form were often white environmentalists and conservationists, BIPOC stories surrounding environmentalism and environmental justice were deliberately erased, silenced and ignored. 1800s, environmental justice and American identity, a vicious loop. As the American identity begins to take hold, so did the understanding of what identity actually looked like. The American identity has historically been reserved exclusively for WASP men, who were entitled to stolen land and a privileged way of life that BIPOC communities were and continue to be denied. At this time, the struggle for environmental justice refers to the resistance against state-sanctioned genocide via police brutality and calculated sacrifice zones, forced assimilation via systemic racism and white supremacy, and enslavement via capitalist structures that specifically target anyone who isn't white and affluent. It's important to keep in mind that maintaining an existence in the face of exploitation, genocide, erasure, and destruction to one's way of life and cultural traditions, which sustains and protects the environment, is environmental justice work.
Thank you all for your attention in watching that video, just kind of as an introduction on just the history of intersectional environmentalism and just kind of thinking about the origins of the environmental justice movement. Okay, so in 1991, delegates met for the first People of Color Environmental Justice Leadership. And what these delegates from and experts came to do was create a set of principles to guide advocacy and grassroots organizers. And it kind of remains a founding document that grounds folks in environmental justice work. So here I have summarized the first 6, there's 17 principles. And I also have the link to the full document of all 17 environmental justice principles will be included in our handout, in our resource handout at the end. So understanding the Western climate science perspective of the climate crisis can be valuable. However, it is only one view in which as we understand it, is like a vast so insert here the principles of environmental justice, which include the right to be free of ecological destruction, the right to ethical and balanced use of land and renewable resources, right to self-determination of all people and communities, public policy based on mutual respect of all people, universal protection from nuclear actions that threaten right to clean air, land, water, food. So thinking about environmental justice and how we are going to kind of, teach our students about this crisis, we have to remember that we have to provide a multitude of perspectives and a multitude of knowledge to make sure that everyone's, perspectives and lives and livelihood and culture are honored. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So there is no dictionary definition for climate justice. So I've kind of come up with my own summarized version just from my own research and interpretation. Climate justice activists or advocates understand the origins of the climate crisis to be colonialism, capitalism, and racism. These systems altered land and societies across continents and had lasting effects on both people and the planet. So climate justice is a lens through which a person understands the social origins of the climate crisis and the solutions that bring everyone along. So climate justice dispels the myth that humans are separate from nature and that all humans are equally responsible for and will be equally impacted by rising temperatures. And I think a lot of you have a fundamental understanding of that, just from the things that we were talking about in the chat, like understanding how wealthy nations and consumerism and how just even just like Western nations have contributed so much more to the crisis, but there are communities in the global South, there are more marginalized communities and people who live in other nations who are at the front lines and who are most impacted by the negative impacts of, these systems. So with colonialism, the expansion of European colonization and the colonial worldview drastically transformed land, people, and ecosystems. And with racism, the invention of expansion of anti-Black racism and genocide of indigenous nations cultivated a global society that has normalized monocultures, injustice, oppression, and abuse of certain living things in order to serve other living things. And then capitalism. The institution of chattel slavery and the ideology of viewing humans as separate from and dominant over nature kind of laid the groundwork for what our current economic system is, right? Like natural things are viewed as commodities. The very basic things that life needs in order to thrive are assigned a price, right? And profits come above all else. When thinking about biodiversity, right, like biodiversity is important in ecosystems, and the same thing kind of goes for human ecosystems. And so as our society has progressed, we have to think about like the costs and what were the costs and what did people have to experience. And a lot of that times that like these practices included like eliminating vast amounts of one group of people or devaluing their presence on Earth and making them, erasing cultures and things like that so that everyone is the same and everyone follows the same, belief system and way of living. But we have to make sure that we have diversity of thought, and that includes a multitude of perspectives when we are looking at our instruction on how we teach about climate change in our classrooms. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I have created like climate justice instruction is really a focus of mine. Like I go into the school year, with like the common theme of climate justice. I want to integrate it into as many topics as I can across subject levels. And so what kind of results is like this robust understanding of our connection to nature and human history and things like that. So these are some of the principles that I kind of guide myself when I'm, facilitating instruction, planning lessons, creating units, so on and so forth. Like these are the kinds of things that I keep in mind. So inspired by the principles of environmental justice, I created my own principles of climate justice instruction. And these principles guide how I engage with students and facilitate how my students engage with the content that we cover in our classroom community. So the first thing is being informed. Read books, listen to podcasts, watch videos from a variety of voices, like audit who you are getting your information from. Do they all look the same? We have to make sure that we are, putting perspectives from people who are unlike us and from various communities at the front and center of how we are going to address this crisis, because they are the most impact. It's really important to kind of consider those perspectives from MAPA, which is an acronym for most affected people and areas. So that includes poor folks, Black folks, Indigenous folks, members of the global South, people in South America, Southeast Asia, Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. They are experiencing very extreme conditions now, and they have been for a really long time. And, things have just started to become extreme for us in the Northern Hemisphere, more recently. All means all. So that includes like our instructional practices, right? We want to make sure that it is accessible to all students, right? In our classroom community, we want to make sure that we are bringing in and inviting all of our learners to access the material. The same goes for when we are telling stories, right? We have to be able, and when we're thinking about solutions and we're getting our students involved in projects and we're focusing on how they can make an impact, we have to broaden that scope and make sure that we're not saying all except people who can afford, who can't afford this thing. We can't say all except folks with disabilities. We can't say all except criminals. We can't say all except immigrants. All means all in all aspects of everything that we are learning about and how we can, make the world a more just place. Framework over curriculum. I know that that curriculum has its place in the classroom, but prioritizing a framework and a best practice pedagogy over the curriculum itself can help us with flexibility and differentiating students' needs, and also to be able to discuss topics that aren't normally discussed within curriculums. Like we have to be honest, like justice topics, talking about racism and things like that are not things that are often welcomed. We have, laws that in other states that are trying to stop teachers from having these conversations. And so we have to make sure that we are still kind of, holding the line and saying that like, we still have to make sure that all students know that people from, various communities exist, and that our stories, or, that their stories also deserve to be told just like anyone else's. Become an expert in your standards. I know that we can kind of get really tied to curriculum as teachers because we have so many things that we have to focus on, and we really don't want to always spend the time to create lessons or, put together units or things like that. But like being a champion for your grade level standards and like really thoroughly understanding what the standards are asking you really allows you to align that framework together and kind of talk about things that you don't normally see in standard curriculums and integrate these things into your classroom community. Real world impact, right? We talked about this a lot yesterday about how it's important to actually have students do hands-on, action-oriented, solution-oriented projects so that they can get the, that real world like gratification of, making an impact in their, school community. So community projects, writing letters to elected officials. My colleague Vivian did a really great thing in 4th grade. Like she had her students, write letters to California Congress people to protect the sequoias, and then like legislation was passed, and it was just so great to be able to share that. My son was in that class, and it was just really great to be able to share that real life tangible change that students were able to make, while also working on writing and also gathering information and learning about a new ecosystem and a place in their state. And community and relationships. Right? It's really important for us to develop a positive classroom community and develop genuine relationships with our students. Talking about climate change and talking about, unequal systems can be really vulnerable. And so if we're not connecting with and we're not bonding with our students as humans, and making sure that they are, valued in our classroom space as living autonomous things, and then it's really hard to have these types of conversations and talk about these complex issues the way it can be is most meaningful. Systems over individuals. I love to promote systemic issues, like systemic solutions over individual solutions. So yeah, if we're talking about recycling, cool. We're not just talking about start recycling in your household. We're talking about how can we upgrade the recycling program at our school? Or if we're talking about composting, how can we get, a community compost where things like that. So not just, like, oh, our classroom is going to compost, but think systemically. Think, how can we broaden our reach and expand? Because right now, when we kind of think about the urgency of the crisis, we have to understand scale, and we have to all kind of expand our individual environments and broaden our reach as much as we can. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're going to have a breakout session. It'll be 5 minutes. I would like for you to talk about these 2 questions. What do you think your students should know about climate change and environmental justice when they leave your grade level? So kind of think about the standards, the science standards that you teach, or the ELA standards that you teach, or the social studies standards that you teach, and how can you maybe transform those things into, including a scope of environmental justice in your instruction. And then kind of contemplate what ideas or questions do you have about implementing climate education in your classroom. All right, everyone. Really quickly, does someone want to share something that stood out to them in their breakout room? It's okay if no.
I'll share.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think that some of the main points were that everybody agreed that climate studies is not something that we just do in school, that it's something that could be a source of empowerment, and that we all want to make sure that they see the effects of climate change on their local communities, and that that they understand that humans cause it, and that we can actually fix things, and that our students need to be able to argue from evidence, whether it's graphs, whether it's studies or anything, to explain why they know what they know.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's continue, because I would like to get us quickly into our next breakout session so that we can continue to synthesize with each other. Okay, so I have some examples of some structures and some topics on ways that you could kind of implement climate related topics in your class. And so, Earth's climate system is foundational to our very existence, right? It encompasses all aspects of living on Earth. And it's important to remain aware of that fact, right? And so as we understand that, then it allows us really to see how climate change kind of goes beyond just the science of it and what is happening. And you can also begin to kind of take an interdisciplinary approach to your climate instruction. So, from warm-ups to morning meetings, bell ringers, journal prompts, if you're having community circles, social emotional lessons, read alouds, novel studies, lesson series, projects, field trips, units, your entire classroom theme could be related to, nature or an ecosystem or, artivism, like whatever it is, your entire scope and sequence could even have those things, in your, throughout the year. I'm going to, talk to you more a little bit about how our grade level kind of did that ourselves. Including current events, but including that good climate news in there, right? When communities are making progress, when communities have a big court win, when, Indigenous groups are gaining land back, when, plastic bans are being put into place, when wealth is being, redistributed and, funding is going towards, communities who are on the front lines, right? We want to be delivering that news to students. We want to be letting them know that there are people around who are continuing to work for this, and they can be, they can find their own place in that as well. And then, just thinking about our standards and how our standards are aligned. I think about elementary, right? I teach 5th grade, which is US history. Colonization is a big part of US history, and colonization is also a big part of the origins of the climate crisis. And so as a 5th grade teacher, I have really worked hard to try to think about how those ideas can connect with each other and how we can discuss our social studies standards and our science standards and, practice in, our ELA units and kind of intermingle those things. Science, the same thing. It's not just about the data. It's not just about the information. It's also just about stories and understanding, that there are people and lives that we attach to these negative statistics or that we attach to, these graphs and things. And so it really is important to incorporate that as well in addition to, our science related topics and how we talk about how climate change impacts, the science of it all. As well as, green holidays. Like there's more than Earth Day and Arbor Day. If you just Google, there's so many different things that can highlight, coral reefs or Indigenous people or biodiversity, so there's a lot of flexibility on how climate change and climate justice can really be integrated in your classroom. It doesn't just have to be, one unit is when we talk about climate change. It really can flow throughout the school year. So next slide, please, Vivian. Thank you. So here are 3 integrated units that my 5th grade team did this past school year, where we had social emotional for the fall, our SEL units and our language arts units kind of melded together. And we asked questions about what makes us who we are, what makes a community, what does it mean to be American, things like that. In the winter, we did a social studies and language arts integrated unit that discussed cultural origin stories. So how different groups of people around the world view and believe the kind of stories around how humans came to be on the earth, right? We talk about a multitude of perspectives and a multitude of cultural origin stories. And we talk about human migration and like the oldest human bones and things to be found. And we just talk about the story of humanity. And in that, we also are able to talk about Indigenous origin stories. And then we talk about Indigenous cultures. And that's where we start, getting into our social studies. And we're talking about Indigenous people and then how colonialism kind of transformed the land and people at that time. And students are producing, informational writing. So that's, our ELA unit. We're doing a read aloud of a variety of nonfiction. So that's when we're doing our nonfiction and our readers unit as well. So, and like the content, we're able to kind of be flexible and situate the content where we're still covering our standards, still teaching in a variety of subject areas, science topics, social studies topics, but we're also building that literacy as well. And then in the spring, we have a big culminating project where the theme is imagining a just and sustainable future. And students choose a writing piece of any genre of their choice, because by the end of the year, we've done all writing types. And so, they can choose to write a fantasy story. I had students, I had a student who wrote a comic book about an alternate universe where humans addressed climate change in one universe and humans didn't address climate change in the other. I have, a student who chose to write a letter to Coca-Cola about plastic pollution for their argument, and they chose argumentative. So it's a really good way for us to kind of bring in all of the learning that we've done all year, and just kind of incorporate all of those things. So I did want to also share some examples. So we are going to head over to my social media account really quick, so I can give you some examples. So Vivian, if you scroll, and let's go ahead and go to, keep scrolling down. Okay, so we can stop there. So here our colonization unit was a lot about the transformation of the land. Our essential questions in colonization kind of wrapped around just like, how did colonization impact ecosystems? How did it impact people, right? Just kind of shaping those questions where we're not just like talking about, what our history books kind of discuss. Thank you. Like, what was colonial life for various groups of people, right? We talk about what colonial life was like for the European settlers that came over, but we don't often focus on what that meant for the indigenous people who were there. We don't often focus on the enslavement of Black folks and what their experience was there. They are usually limited to a paragraph, or their experience is usually limited to the notes. And just like thinking about how one narrative is emphasized in our instruction, we have to try to make sure that we are expanding those perspectives and that we can do that along our standards. So I also had students, to spark ideas for their project. I just asked them like what they might see in a more just and sustainable society. And so many of them were saying, well, we have to get rid of fossil fuels. We see more bike lanes, walkable cities, electric buses. Students saying banning single-use plastics, citywide, community-wide composting, recycling, things like that, right? They said like, we should be promoting more family-owned and community-owned businesses rather than like big, large corporations, and like, more handmade things rather than factory-made things, and things like that. And it's just really just a conversation, getting students really to kind of think about and imagine what our futures could look like if we were to get it right. Right. And we were talking about that radical imagination. We talk about that stubborn optimism. We don't have to always just be doom and gloom. These are the problems. We can say, like, what would it look like if we got it right? If we did the things and we made it more equal and people had access to clean air, clean water, and everything that they needed to survive, what would that look like? And you can incorporate your learning throughout the year with those things. So I had, students. We did a culminating project for graduation. It was like on display, and students made models of what a more just and sustainable future would look like that they broadcasted at graduation and could like show the parent community and could show, the other teachers in the community what they are thinking of and what they would like to envision for their world. And then we take it to the next step and we do these action-oriented steps. And get students making real life change. And, I've done all of that while also, teaching my grade level standards. So I want to give us more time for breakouts. So we're going to do another breakout session, and just kind of think about in your respective like grade levels and grade level and subject, which standards or benchmarks can you see teaching through a climate justice lens? Like, what are some things that you already currently do that you can maybe tweak a little bit or expand a little bit, include a read aloud or something like that, that will have a climate justice lens to it, okay? And this one will be longer. We'll do this one like 9 minutes, so that way we can just come back and like say bye.
I did have a question for you before you put us in breakout rooms.
Sure.
What books or literature did you attach to the teachings that you did around those topics? Do you have a list of that?
Yes, I do. I actually, it will be included in the follow-up link, all the books. I also have a slide for our like goodbye send-off that everyone can kind of screenshot, and it has like all of the books that have kind of shaped how I've done my framework and curriculum.
That Brittany has been talking about in our class.
Yeah.
I was offered a class for 10th graders, which is leadership. And there's really no curriculum. So my principal's like, you're going to get a bunch of 10th graders, and every week you want to come up with a specific task that you and your students complete in a way of kind of reforming the school, whether it be something social you plan or whatever. So I've been really enjoying these PDs the past 3 sessions, and I'm like gathering ideas. I'm like, what if I, turn this, leadership. I have a unit, for example, in this leadership class where we just aggressively kind of come up with activities and tasks that not only are going to raise awareness with climate change, but also just bring changes to the school. I'll be honest, I haven't thought exactly what tasks I would do, but I have been brainstorming, and which kind of lines up very well with me being the climate literacy champion this year at my campus. So I'm even thinking about taking that position into this classroom and involving students, because technically with that position, you don't really have a class, but I just think it lined up so well with this leadership class I was also placed in to kind of, include both. But yeah, that's what's been going on in my head.
Yeah, I'd just like to give a quick shout out. It looks like we have a lot of climate literacy champions here already. So I just want to say hello, woo-hoo, great for all this, it's just absolutely wonderful. So yes, does someone else want to add in?
Hi, I teach AP environmental science, so this is my thing. And but I also run the environmental club of my school. We collect recyclables, and then we sponsored the seed bomb activity. So and it's fascinating that, well, I live in San Pedro down south, so it's cooler here than downtown. And I made sure that those seeds would actually grow. But it's fascinating how it did not. And I was like telling the kids, because there's a nonprofit organization that contacted me. So we're restarting August.
They really, the nice thing about that is it's something that they can present then. So like some of them, even simple things like, why don't we have a clean water, a filtered water so kids can bring their own bottles. Some of them use the garden space and let community come in and grow food. They planted more trees, they put solar panels. So I like that idea because it's local, but a lot of those actions that they think of, they can actually present to their school board member. And I think that's the biggest change I want to do this year is when they reimagine our school, is that it doesn't stop there, that then they learn to push to see what changes we can happen. And part of it with our new superintendent, he likes social media. Our kids like social media too. And so we can push it and they can publicly push their plans and we can see what happens.
Excellent.
And it ties in, it's so easy with science. Everything ties in with our science and engineering practices. No admin. If you have a troublesome admin, no one can say it's not based on our standards, because it all, even the presentation, that's part of every subject's, and claim evidence reasoning. So nobody can get on you for not teaching your standards.
Javier, you have 53 seconds. Can you do something with that?
Sure. 53 seconds, huh? I forgot the question. I was so kind of, I'm sorry. I was looking at her Instagram account that she was saying, because I was looking at that colonization unit, because that's what I'm starting with right now. And I did 7th grade last year. Now I'm doing 8th grade, so I have to make like a whole new curriculum. And I was thinking about like climate change after going through like today's PD, and I was like, how can I use it? I was looking at her material, and it's actually pretty good. Like, she brought the Jamboard to life, which I think that I'm gonna probably use, because I don't like 8th grades with iPads. They just get distracted too much. So I'm just taking everything I'm learning here and trying to figure out how I can use it to my lessons for this year, as I'm like making it literally now, and things like that.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So lots of things to kind of pack into an hour, so we're just going to kind of wrap it up here. So Viv, we can go ahead and do slide 15. So screenshot this, save it for your, save this for your kind of reference. How to Save a Planet is a podcast. It is a very thorough podcast focused on solutions, and focused on climate justice-based solutions, and just kind of spanning all kinds of genres, like from economics to politics, to Indigenous people, to police brutality, to nuclear power, pros and cons, to like, does your carbon footprint really matter? Things like that. Like, it is so thorough. All We Can Save is I recommend that book to everyone. If you really want to like feel inspired to take action, and thinking about, looking forward to a more just, sustainable future, All We Can Save is a great book for that. And same thing with The Intersectional Environmentalist, just kind of giving the basic knowledge. But for the classroom, I use Paradise on Fire and Towers Falling, both as read alouds that talk a lot just about, we have identity, community, what it means to be American in one. And then we have like a combination of race, gender, and class mixed with, climate change and environmental justice in, a fiction narrative here. Indigenous People's History of the United States for young people is really great for providing an alternate perspective of, mainstream United States history, and meeting those standards. And then A People's Curriculum for the Earth. The primary grades for this focus is 7th through 12th, but I found that I can still adapt some of the information in here, and it's also just like very informative for me as a 5th grade teacher, but I, can make it relevant. I think it's possible to make it like relevant, or at least just, kind of inform yourself for other grade levels as well, just on how we can, incorporate these interdisciplinary concepts as we go. And braiding sweetgrass is just kind of like listening to, like ASMR. like it's a beautiful book. It's so poetic and includes so much information and Indigenous knowledge and wisdom in there. I found it a really valuable resource. We can go ahead and go on to the next. So a final reflection, take a screenshot of this too, because this is kind of important for like your next steps, just thinking about how you want to not only incorporate, like how can you expand what you currently do? If you're an expert in, or you feel like you have been talking about climate change or climate justice in your classroom, how can you stretch it a little more? How can you, make a project that makes a real world impact to content that you already teach? Or if you're already good at like field trips and projects and things like that, how can you maybe incorporate more of these concepts in your reading and writing instruction, and stuff like that? So just how can you challenge yourself and build on what you already do to continue to expand that reach and continue to deepen the understanding of your students surrounding climate justice, climate change, and just the kind of interdisciplinary factors in our lives. Go ahead and go to the yes, sorry. You have a question about how to become a climate literacy champion. Okay. So I believe that climate literacy champions are campus specific. So I would recommend contacting your admin at your campus and saying, have you already delegated a climate literacy champion? Have you heard of the climate literacy resolution? And kind of, putting your, feeling your admin out for what they know about the resolution and climate literacy champion. And then if you want to, and then whatever the process is to become that on your campus, then, I would suggest following your admin's lead there. And then if you have any questions, like this is, this is so much information, and I honestly wish that we had more time together and that we could have more time to, talk with each other and collaborate with each other. But there are definitely, I am a member of the Climate Curriculum Committee of Climate Reality Los Angeles. And so we are working really closely with LAUSD, with implementing this. So I am sure that I will see some of you again, and you may see me again, throughout the work of implementing the climate literacy resolution across LAUSD. But if you do have specific questions about the presentation, or you just want to know more about my work and what I do in the classroom, even if you're looking for resources and learning materials, you can email me at bmeadows669@gmail.com. You can also find me on Patreon. I am on patreon.com/teachermomchronicles. And you can find me if social media is also where you like to, learn from. You can find me on Instagram at Climate Justice Teacher Mom on Instagram. So I really thank you all. Sorry for running a little over, but I really appreciate your time. And, I'll stay back for questions if there's anyone who has any pressing questions that they'd like to go over.
Hi, there's a question on here about Schoology group and access code. There isn't a group yet, right? That's still in progress. Can I say something about that, Charlie?
Yeah.
So at my school, I teach at Marshall, John Marshall in Los Feliz. And so teachers have the ability to create groups. So in fact, if we don't need DOI approval for it, we could just go ahead and create one. I could even create one, and then we could share it, and then we could have it for all climate literacy champions as well as allies if we want.
Are we able to do it district-wide though, or is it just within?
Yeah, I think that as long as you share it, because we have done it through for various reasons. I belong to many groups, and basically we just created it, and then we share the access code to anybody, and that could be all of us, in fact, and more. So I was under the impression that it was awaiting some kind of district approval, but if it's not, then we can just go ahead and do that already, I think.
Mabel, I would try that and see if we can go across schools that way. That would be really nice, because they're a little slow to get things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so the Schoology group would be very useful to disseminate that kind of information. And basically, if we share the access code, teachers will join themselves. So we don't have to add anyone. And then we could also even invite admin if we feel like that would be useful. And then there's a place where you can like put updates, so we can make announcements and we can share resources, and it's very powerful. So I think it's a good way to go.
I do have a question though. Since this climate change this climate change initiative is something we're doing district-wide, I understand that we're saying the district is a bit slow, but is that funding that we're talking about already there in the budget? And whilst we go ahead and create our own Schoology group, is there something in the works for the district to create a group for this climate change initiative, since it is something that is in the forefront?
Let me jump in there, because I just had a discussion with my principal to be the climate literacy champion, and his response was, I've had no information from the district. I have no funding from the district. Therefore, there is no position. And I'm assuming, in his words, I'm assuming that it is at principal discretion. So I think it's really much more powerful to just get the Schoology group going on our own, and let everything else is a whole different ball of wax. But getting the Schoology group going will enable teachers to talk amongst themselves and actually understand and know and hear from us and each other what the situation is, because this group has first-rate information, and there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation out there that's muddying the waters, and a Schoology group could really disseminate information timely and effectively.
The other thing, once we get started and we start collecting resources, I got up early this morning and copied 100 resources that people shared at yesterday's meeting. It's the first thing in the chat. And so there's so many resources. What I found as a tech coordinator at Van Nuys High School, that when I wanted to share resources, I would often copy from various district sites that I was aware of and put them on my local Schoology group and give teachers access, and then use those for staff developments at my school that they could always find. So once we start building this and getting a network and building a community, we'll be able to transfer it to anything the district creates very quickly. It's a matter of copying announcements and folders. It's really easy. But what's hard is to build the community. It takes time. And I think we should start, as soon as possible.
Lucy, do you have a question? Your hand was raised.
I had a comment, and that is the idea that at this particular school they said that, well, they hadn't received any communication just means that they have to send another one, because supposedly, according to the people that we have in the committee, that principals are receiving these notices to assign a climate literacy champion, and it's supposed to be done by August the 26th. So we're not going to let up on that, and but we do have to go forward with the Schoology as well. I just wanted to say that, and I invite everyone to think about what they can do at 9 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon on August the 30th to tell the district that this needs to be done more thoroughly. If you want to contact us, I'm going to drop our email once again in the chat so that you can see it. Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to echo something that Lucy had said. So regarding the climate literacy champions, there was a formalized letter sent by the Division of Instruction, by the head of Division of Instruction, to all principals. And so a principal may have not received it, may have not looked at it. It is the start of school. So again, I would say maybe not wait for it to come to you. If you haven't seen about it, heard about it, follow up, like Brittany said, with the admin, follow up with your principal. But there is a deadline on this. It might be soft, because climate literacy champions we're just working through this and how to figure out what the duties are. But don't give up. It's early, and persistence, and things will happen. That's the only way we're going to solve this.
Do we have a copy of that letter we can share? Because I think my principal thought that his concern was that this is it's a line on the matrix and it needs full funding. He doesn't understand that it's a differential of $619 every semester.
Yeah, it is funded.
So is there a copy of the letter we can share?
Share here. I don't know if I can do that. I could try to. Let me try.
What we'll do is we have to do some resources. So we will find this and we will add it to our resources. So it'll be one of the things that we'll track down for you.
Thanks. That's awesome. And see, that's one of the kinds of things that could be placed in Schoology resources.
Absolutely. Perfect thing.
There was one last thing that I wanted to say, just a small thing, and but it's very important, and that is it's important for kids to know where they can move from here and why they're in the situation that they're in. But it's also important for them to know the rich history of resistance that exists and who they're a part of, because it's not, they need to understand how rich this thing is going. This struggle has been going on. I just want to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your engagement and your attention. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend and a great school year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.